Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 74 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm lucky to be joined by Tessa Amina today. Tessa is the founder of Intuitive Expression and is a neurodivergent therapist, coach, and Reiki practitioner. They offer international coaching for professionals drawing on lived experience with depression, anxiety, PTSD, religious trauma, grief, neurodiversity, and addiction. Tessa provides compassionate support for mental health challenges, spiritual growth, and creative blocks. Tessa is here today to share some experience about living life as a neurodivergent and to also share some productivity tips. Welcome to the show, Tessa.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I heard Tessa talk at a workshop organized by the Neurodiversity Network maybe a month and a half ago and really enjoyed that. It's wonderful to have you on now.
Thanks.
We'll kick things off by asking about your experience with neurodiversity. When did you realize you weren't neurotypical?
Well, I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 31, so fairly late in life, while working on an acute care setting in a psychiatric hospital for children and teens.
Okay. And was that because you saw yourself in some of the people that you were helping?
Actually, it was because I was making mistakes. It was a really fast-paced environment, and there were a lot of details, and details are hard for me, and especially in a fast-paced environment. And so I was really needing to get help. And so that's what led to my visit with the doctor, and they were able to identify that they thought that I had ADHD.
And after you had that diagnosis, did you look back and see some of the traits earlier on in your life as well?
Most definitely. Back in my childhood, my teenage years, and really reflecting upon just chaos and disorganization, my difficulty with focusing in the classroom. I got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid for behavioral issues. Just a very disruptive kid in the classroom. So I had a lot of energy. So, but yeah, it did. It gave me a lot of like, oh, well, that makes sense. And oh, now I don't know I didn't test very well and why testing was so difficult for me. So it really gave me a lot of insight into what my experiences were as a kid and as a teenager and even into my undergrad and graduate education.
Yeah, that's great to be able to bring some self-compassion through the diagnosis.
Indeed. I grew up thinking I wasn't very smart. Despite the academic success I had to get into graduate school, I still really struggled with testing. I always really struggled with feeling like I wasn't very intelligent or I wasn't as smart as my classmates.
So was it a situation where the pressure of tests didn't bring out the best in you?
Yeah, it really brought out a lot of anxiety, a lot of inability to focus. I think a lot of being in a space where it wasn't not a great environment for me. So a lot of chaos around being in a space with a bunch of people in a small space trying to focus on a task was very difficult.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's probably not great for many people. In terms of the behavioral challenges, I wonder if it was you or if it's just the school was very boring and didn't have the right learning style.
Yeah, I would agree. I look at some of the programs that are available now. I have a nephew who got the opportunity to go to a high school that was completely different and got to really immerse themselves in what they loved to learn versus, being fed things to them and being told, this is what you need to learn today. And I think if I would have had an experience like that, I probably would have been much better and felt much better about myself growing up.
Yeah, same here. In terms of the challenges that you experienced beyond the issues with tests and being in that fast-paced environment and having, I guess, in their really requirement for attention to detail and things like that, what were the other challenges that you experienced back then? And has it improved significantly since then?
I would say focusing on mundane tasks has been a constant struggle. Just simple things like paying the bills on time and those kinds of things, staying organized and making sure like those day-to-day tasks done. And I feel I'm really lucky to have a partner who's really great at a lot of those things. And so I think that, that's helped a lot. And early in our marriage, it was difficult because he didn't quite understand the way that my brain works. And at this point in our marriage, we're in a really good place in terms of communication and compassion for these things. But early on, it was not easy to be in a partnership with someone whose brain works very differently.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I often have challenges with my wife in terms of our different styles of thinking. That's great that you've got the support. And what's it been like post-diagnosis in terms of knowing more about your brain, but also putting in different coping strategies to make it easier?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Have you been able to find different types of work or different ways of coping with some of the challenges there?
Yeah, initially I was medicated when I was working at the hospital. I really felt like I needed to be at that point because I couldn't make mistakes in that kind of setting. But I found the stimulants to be difficult for me. They made me really irritable. And so I ended up working in a less intense setting since then that didn't really require me to be as detail oriented and such a high fast pace. So the environment is now changed. I'm being able to open up my own business. I can really lean into my strengths instead of having to do the things that I'm not very good at as often. And at this point on my journey, I have found that using different supplements, specifically Dr. Daniel Amen has some wonderful supplements that have helped me immensely with focus. And then also using sound. There are different kinds of sounds that really help my brain focus. So it could just be music that I enjoy. It could be even so far as like isochronic tones. So really be able to alter my brainwave state so that I am much more productive.
I haven't heard of isochronic tones before. Is it similar to binaural beats or is it quite different?
It is very similar. One thing that's different that I understand, again, I'm not a scientist, but my understanding of the difference is you don't necessarily have to put earbuds in like you do with the other beats that you're speaking about. I believe you have to put the earbuds in to make it work. But with isochronic tones, my understanding is it isn't required. Don't quote me on all that. All I know is it works for me. I can definitely share some resources, but yeah, those tones have been really helpful, especially when I was working in a cubicle environment. It was really important.
Yeah, I can imagine that. You mentioned changing the type of work. What has that allowed you to tap into more of the strengths that you have?
Yeah, so holding space and really getting to know people and being a therapist, being a coach, being a Reiki practitioner, those things are really natural for me. And I don't struggle with focus because I'm really passionate about people and find them fascinating. So if I'm fascinated, I'm engaged. And my hyper focus works really well in those situations. When it comes to details like administrative tasks, billing, returning phone calls, those kinds of things, I've made a point to get those accomplished first thing in the morning when my brain is freshest after engaging in my meditation and my mind-body bridging practice.
Sounds like a good way to deal with some of those challenging tasks. I struggle with them too at times. I tend to do them in the afternoon, but maybe I should try them in the morning. In terms of mind-body bridging, that was the subject of the workshop that I heard you talk about, and I'd love to hear you. Is that a core part of your work these days, or do you do many different things? And depending on the modality that's required for the client, you'll use different techniques?
Yeah, I'm pretty eclectic. My body bridging is my foundation, though. I would say it really flows into everything that I do because of the nature of the model. And it's a big part of the work that I do.
Nice. And is it mostly that you work one-on-one with people, or do you do group workshops?
At this time, I've been doing one-on-one. I've actually been thinking about starting a group workshop. So yeah, if anybody's interested, ping me. Kind of waiting for the people to ask for it. I used to do a lot of mind body bridging groups in person. I've never done one online, but I'd be really excited to give it a shot.
Well, the one that you did with April was maybe almost a group workshop. I found it
Almost, yeah. Is it?
really impactful. Thanks a lot for
Oh,
doing
cool.
that one. Do you do it
Yeah.
in terms of working with clients? Is it mostly in person, or do you do it online as well?
All of my therapy clients are virtual,
Okay.
and I plan on having virtual coaching clients as well. Reiki is in person, and I've been going to people's homes to provide service.
Got it. You mostly work with neurodivergent clients, or it's a mixture?
I think everybody's a little neurodivergent, to be honest. So I think everyone kind of is on the spectrum somewhere. But I would say a lot of the clients that I work with identify, especially with ADHD, it's become very prevalent.
And you also, in the notes, you mentioned that you're ideating on a poetry program as well.
I am. I have an idea. Still trying to figure out if I want this to be online or in person, or maybe I should try both. But really would like to help people access their poetic voice to help them find a sense of inherent worth. It's been a big part of my path. Creative expressions really helped me find my sense of inherent worth, even when I've struggled with my disabilities and have had to take breaks from work and things like that. For my well-being, creative expression has really helped me tune into that part of myself.
So is that almost a form of art therapy, but doing it through poetry instead of painting or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. And I also paint, but I usually paint when I can't write. It's not like I'm painting for people or to like show it to anybody really. It's more, okay, I can't write right now because my brain's overwhelming me. So I'm going to paint until my brain quiets down and then I can write. So it's definitely been helpful for me as well.
Maybe I should try that, because I have a limiting belief that I'm not a visual thinker and not a good drawer or painter, but it's probably not a helpful narrative. And I have enjoyed looking at the side of my room on my wardrobe door. I've got my vision board that I drew, and I really like, even though the drawings are very infantile, I have enjoyed the process of doing it.
Yeah. So I think
Maybe I
creative
should-
expression. Yeah, it helps us access our inner child too. I mean, we're like all day having to be grown-ups and work and pay the bills, and I think drawing helps us like access something inside of ourselves that maybe needs some attention sometimes. I don't know. But I can only speak for myself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm also thinking about when you were talking about the admin tasks, and I really struggle with that as well. I have to do business cases for my work. And there was one day where I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And so instead as a bit of a PDA thing, I drew it instead.
Oh, I love that.
Do a one pager, and I was just thinking, I don't want to do this. This is pointless. So I'm just going to subvert the system by, it's one page, and I covered up all the information, but I did it as the comic instead. And I had so much fun with that, and it was very easy to motivate myself to do it. So maybe I should think about incorporating that into other parts of my life.
That's fantastic. If we can find any way to bring joy into the tasks that we don't want to do, definitely makes it a little easier.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of joy, what do you do when you're not working? What brings you joy in other parts of your life?
Well, I love movies. I am a bit of a movie junkie, and I feel movies are very healing as well. So movies are a big part of my life. Just finished a film class and absolutely loved it. So I hope someday to make some movies, but that's the big dream someday. I also really enjoy reading and writing poetry, being outside in nature. I love really good food. I don't know if I'd call myself a foodie, but I love wonderful restaurants, especially restaurants from different countries. Part of what I love about living in the US is there's just so much diversity of cuisine here. And I feel really lucky to live here and be able to enjoy those things. And I love to travel. When I can swing it, I love to travel.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular genre of movies that you like watching?
I love Pixar movies. I love animation. I think it's just so much fun. And I also really enjoy kind of cerebral things too, things that make me think more deeply about lives. And also, I love learning about people, like documentaries about different fascinating people as well.
Yeah, nice. In terms of the travel and exotic cuisine, do you have a destination that you went to recently, or a different cuisine that you consumed recently?
Oh, well, my last trip and was to France last year, and I visited a dear friend of mine and got the chance to eat a bunch of really wonderful French food. I had another friend years ago, and they had said when they lived in France, they put on 15 pounds. And I was like, I can see how that happens here. The food just tastes better there. I don't know what it is, but it's really wonderful.
It's funny. I heard someone say that there is the risk of that, but they also talked about how quality of the ingredients they perceive to be a lot better in France. And they were talking about how they are gluten intolerant and can't really consume bread in the US, but when they went to France, they ate it and they actually lost weight.
Yes.
Depends on the extent and the amount of pastries that you eat.
Yes, I'm gluten-free and I didn't have the courage to try it. I was just, I'm like, I can't do this. I don't want to ruin my trip. But yeah, it was the food definitely, I think, is nutritionally much better there than here in the US.
And they do seem to have some gluten-free products as well. Can't remember the name of it, but there's a chickpea pancake that is a special dish in Nice, I think.
Ooh, I'll have to go there sometime. I've never been to Nice. That sounds lovely.
Yeah, next trip. Now let's go back to we're mentioning the isochronic tones and some other tactics for improving your productivity. You want to go through what allows you to get into a state that you can do some of the mundane work, but also some of the important creative and expressive work as well.
Well, when it comes to the tasks, in order for me to get them done, I have to remember them. And that is sometimes the biggest hurdle. So having a place where I have things listed where I can see them all the time. So I have a whiteboard that's in the kitchen and that's my to-do list. And so I know it sounds really basic, but it really is a big deal for me. And then in terms of creating an environment where I'm productive to get those tasks done, the other aspects would be making sure that my space is clear and clean, making sure that I have lists of other, maybe even smaller to-dos that I have listed next to my desk. As of like right now, I have my note for myself that says Illinois licensed professional counselor that I need to get that reactivated. So I always have like a little list of the immediate to-dos near me, as well as making sure my space is clear. And then if I'm doing those tasks, it's really using music, be that isochronic tones, be that classical music, whatever I'm really in the mood for that helps me get into that zone.
It's interesting about the whiteboard and the little list in front of you. Do you find that the analog nature of it works better for you than, say, using Todoist or an app to keep track of your tasks?
Yeah, I need it hands-on. Technology is a blessing and a curse for me. And I find that electronic reminders they're great for appointments and making sure I have time for a client. But when it comes to tasks, I end up not seeing it anymore. When it's in there all the time, I look at it and it's gone. I don't even see it. So for me, having it in paper and a pen, being able to physically check it off gives me, I think, some kind of neurochemical experience that helps reinforce. Oh, that was good. You did that. Good job. Yeah, there's something behavioral for me with that.
The only challenge I have with that is I sometimes lose the bits of paper. Do you have any tactics around that?
Oh, yes, definitely done that too. That's where like the whiteboard helps, I think. But when around on my desk, yeah, I've definitely lost the stickies, and it's usually just kind of a hit or miss with the stickies. So I feel you there.
With the whiteboard, when do you update that? Is it a weekly thing or do you do it every night?
When I'm in a good place, it's several times a week. I'll just kind of check on making sure I'm getting those things done. And if I'm having like a rough week, it might be once a week if there's a lot of things coming at me. So it really depends.
Yeah, I've got a whiteboard on my fridge, and there have been some times where I've been very active with it and other times where I seem to develop task blindness and I just don't see it anymore.
Yes.
Don't actually recognize that there are things on it that I should update. and maybe that's something for me to work on. I find if it's immediately in front of me in my workspace, that tends to work better.
Yes, definitely. I think that was one of the first things in my marriage. It was like, why do you have to have things out all the time? And I'm like, but if I don't have that there, I'm going to forget. Like, I won't remember. And now he's a lot more compassionate about it. But I initially did not understand why. Why is that sitting there? It's reminding me I need more of that.
In terms of productivity advice in general, there's often some advice that doesn't work for neurodivergent people. Are there any pieces of advice that you really don't like?
Yeah, I would say the concept of grit has never served me well. Pushing myself through something, trying to put pressure behind a task, does not work. One thing that I think that has helped me maybe access that in a different way, and maybe what other people that are neurotypical identify as grit, is one trick I used to tell my students a lot when I was coaching was to trick myself into thinking that due dates were sooner than they were, so that I would get the adrenaline of the due date, so that I would get it done, but then I wouldn't have the anxiety present of I don't have enough time, because I'd make sure that I had another day or two. So I had sort of a window of grace. So that was one way that I was able to engage with the adrenaline without it being an anxious adrenaline, was almost to trick myself. So it served my students most of the time.
Yeah, I find that very helpful with calendar appointments as well, that I put it in for 15 minutes earlier. And then ideally I forget that I have put it in there. Yesterday, for example, I thought I was running late for my dentist appointment, and then it turned out that I was half an hour early.
You're nuts. Oh, I've done that so many times.
And it probably goes back also in terms of that idea about grit. It may go back to what you were talking about at the start in terms of school being very hard, and it being hard because it wasn't about exploring your passions and things that you were inherently interested in learning. Do you think that is part of it, that grit is required? I mean, maybe there's always going to be some mundanity associated with most areas of work, but if most of the work is mundane, then it probably requires more grit and more pushing yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, I have to get these things done in the morning when I have the energy to engage in those kind of grit-like situations. And I think the other thing that helps me is to keep big picture in mind. That if I get these things done that I don't want to do, then I'll get to do the other things that I want to do. So it's almost like the things that I do want to do are going to reinforce what I get done in the beginning. Otherwise, it's really hard for me to give myself permission to dive into things I'm passionate about if I don't get those other things done and feel like I've accomplished what needs to get done in order to be that responsible adult that pays the bill.
The other thing that it makes me think about in terms of grit is, I read the book by Angela Duckworth, and it seemed to be talking about how do you motivate yourself to keep going for projects that are going to take multiple years to get through, as well as things like the Navy SEALs, which I don't think is something that I really aspire to. But it makes me think about, in terms of ADHD, I've got ADHD. I have a tendency to have very intense interests that don't necessarily last for a multi-year period all the time. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they wax and wane. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of how you might have built up your career? Has it been a linear journey, or has it been an eclectic journey?
It's been a very eclectic journey. I think it's really for that reason as well. And there's always been goals in mind. I think big picture goals of, making a living, finding joy every day. And because of the way that I am, I think my interests are very diverse and often change and fluctuate. And as a result, my career has done that as well. And my goals have dictated some of that. Some of that was definitely a need for income. I was in sales for about 2.5 years and made a bunch of money, but it was miserable. So yeah, my career has been all over the place. And to be honest, I think it's been really rewarding for that reason. I'm grateful that I enjoy many different things, and it helps me stay engaged with life when I have lots of interests.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned earlier was needing to take time away from work. And is that part of why it's important to not be pushing yourself constantly? Because it makes me think about burnout as well in terms of that mindset.
Yes. It's absolutely imperative for me to pause every day and meditate, because it helps me tune into that sense of inherent worth that part of myself, peaceful part of myself that I think is within all of us, but we're not always paying attention to it, right? But that little part of myself so that I can take the pressure off and be able to allow myself to, I don't know, it just makes life easier because then I'm not pushing myself. I'm just in presence and I'm in a natural state versus feeling like I'm trying to fix something all the time, or to go back to like the mind body bridging model. It helps me avoid being in a fixer state of wanting to fix something that feels broken and more in tune with that inherent sense of worth and state of flow where joy is present.
I love that. I love it so much that we're going to take a break now.
Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actionable takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
We're back from our break. We both did a little meditation. I got a glass of water, and we're now ready to talk about your morning routine. What does it look like?
Well, it looks like I have a spot where I sit every morning where I have my cup of coffee and I have a notebook and a pen. And I also have inspiring things to read. So I might have a book of poetry, a spiritual book, and I typically access one of those to inspire me before I meditate. And then we'll do a meditation. And then after that, especially if I have a big day ahead of me, I'll do a map. There's like a big meeting, big conversation about to happen. Doing a map prepares me, helps my mind get clear, and helps me stay calm and organize my thoughts for the day.
Could you explain the concept of a map for people who aren't familiar with mind-body bridging?
Sure. So a map is a way for you to get a snapshot into your brain and what you're thinking about. So it's an awareness practice and helps you become aware of what your thoughts are. Oftentimes our brains are so busy, we don't even know what we're thinking about. Mapping helps you slow down and put your thoughts on paper. And it helps you label your thoughts as well. For example, a lot of models really focus on negative and positive thoughts and kind of the duality of that. This model doesn't do that. This model actually does the opposite. And so what it is identifying a thought and then saying, I'm having the thought, and then you share the thought. And by becoming aware of those thoughts and labeling them in that way, you diffuse the thoughts from being as powerful in your head as maybe they would be if you weren't identifying them or realizing what you're thinking about. So mapping really helps you identify what you're requiring of yourself and what you're requiring of the world, and helps you build that self-compassion muscle. And then the second map that you do with that first map is you bridge. And bridging is mindfulness. So it's helping you tune into sensation. And when you activate that sensation, so be that smell, touch, listening to background noise, my practice in the morning, holding my cup of coffee and really feeling the heat of the coffee in my hands and tasting the coffee more intently, those kinds of slowing down practices. And then second map, you'll be able to find a different experience of your mind. There's more clarity. It's usually more compassion for yourself in the second map as well. So that is mind body bridging for mapping. But the bridging part is, I think, the most important part for me. Really being able to experience my sensation helps me be present and the more present I am, the more aware I am in the moment. So bridging really helps me with those especially those tough moments in the day, so that I have the sort of reservoir within me of compassion with whatever I'm facing.
In terms of the bridging being important, seems like something that could do during, if there's a difficult conversation, for example, that you do the map beforehand and try and get clear on what are the thoughts and emotions going into it. And then the bridging helps you both prepare for it and also stay present during that discussion.
Exactly. Yeah. The maps will prepare me for the conversation. And then when I'm in the conversation, often I will bridge. And that will keep me feeling a lot more regulated and present.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've got a difficult conversation later today. And I remembered when you did the session with the Neurodiversity Network, the part that really spoke to me was the idea of requirements. And I think I probably need to identify the requirements that I have going in that may or may not be reasonable.
Yes. And yeah, the awareness of them often is really just enough to take away the power of the situation. And some requirements are a bad thing, right? Like it's just when they are a point where it's dysregulating you.
Hmm.
So being present with the requirements, that's really the important part. May not be changing it. It might just be being aware of it so that when you present that requirement, it could be a boundary, right? So it could be a boundary with a person. But yeah, becoming aware of it is really the most important part.
Yeah. Some of them are definitely not helpful, the ones I'm aware of. My requirement is I must be the one with all the answers. I think that's not a helpful requirement.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
How long would you normally spend doing the mind-body bridging in the morning and doing the map?
Usually it takes about 5 minutes. So it's not an intensive process. Not a lot of time at all, actually.
Would you have other moments throughout the day? You were mentioning taking pauses throughout the day. Would that be a similar process, or is it a slightly different pause that you would take?
The pauses that I would take during the day are really more engaging with my sensation when I'm doing different things. So, for instance, like when I wash my hands, I pay attention to the way that the water feels. I watch it go down the drain. I smell the soap. I really pay attention to what I'm experiencing with my hands. Touch is my super sense.
Mm.
Everybody's got a different super sense, but yes, touch is mine. My sister, on the other hand, is sound for her. So background noise is really important for her in calming down. But yeah, it's really not really about setting aside even time during the day. It's really just about being present with my body at different routines and moments. And that helps me stay in a state of peace and more flow versus frustration.
Mm. Yeah, I love that in terms of how to remind myself to be mindful, because I've struggled with that people have said to me, Jeremy, be more mindful when I've made a careless mistake, but I find it hard to actually remember because
Yeah,
absent professor type where it's easy for me to get into the inattentive style of ADHD where I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing, and then I'll burn saucepans and things like that. But I like that idea of tying into the super sense and using that as a trigger to come back to senses. Washing my hands is probably one that I could use as well.
yeah. If you can find 3 routines, I usually recommend people to find 3 routines they do every day. Even if it's just getting dressed in the morning or stepping outside first thing in the day and just standing and watching the sky and looking, what do the clouds look like today? Just for a minute can make all the difference in how you're feeling inside.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at doing it in the morning. It's just throughout the day that I need more triggers. But I like the idea of having a few felt triggers. Someone also
Mhm.
suggested every time I walk through a door, that could be a moment. Or going into my
Exactly. Yes, doorknobs. I used to always ask that question with my clients years ago. I'd be like, how often do you actually feel a doorknob in your hand? And so let doorknobs be your prompt because you're probably walking through how many a day? So yeah, just
Mm.
finding something that you do all the time that maybe you're not as mindful about when you're in your car, like feeling the steering wheel in between your hands. It's really about the personalized routine and identifying what works for you. And that's what's going to help it stick.
Awesome. On the other side of the day, how do you wind down at night?
A lot of times it involves sitting in silence, a lot of silence and sitting. I also take supplements and herbs for sleep for myself. I have a very busy mind, and different supplements like lemon balm, otherwise known as Melissa, really helps unwind my brain, and use CBD for any anxiety that might be experiencing. And then there's a Chinese herb that I use as well. And I get regular acupuncture, which really helps with my nervous system. It helps me stay regulated. That makes the evening a lot easier than
Mm.
if I didn't. Sometimes a hot tea, the chamomile, things like that, and engaging in mind body bridging while I'm doing that. So sometimes doing a mat before I go to bed can be really helpful so that I can truly feel my body when I go to bed. And then when I'm in the bed, even, I'll pay attention to gravity and focus on my body sinking down into the bed, maybe touching fabric of the sheet. That's really just about anchoring into my super sense so I can relax my mind and then I don't have the busy mind and it's easier for me to fall asleep.
When would you commence that wind down process? Take the supplements?
Usually like in a 45 minutes, half an hour at the very least. I usually spend some time and I'm a very spiritual person. So I engage in prayer as well before I go to bed. So finding some kind of quiet, grounding, calming thing. Prayer may not be for you, but finding something that is like a way to soothe the self so you're able to unwind.
Yeah, I love that. I might have to look into lemon balm and CBD. Do you take magnesium as well? A lot of people say that helps with sleep.
I do. It's called LMT. It's like a salt with magnesium and potassium. And I don't remember all the things in there, but it's really good. Tastes great. And I've found it to be really great for mood regulation as well.
Oh yeah. Is it the powder that you put into water?
Yes. There's a chocolate one that's a chocolate salt. It tastes like a hot chocolate. It's so good. My husband likes the fruit ones. I'm not really much for the fake fruit taste, but the chocolate's really tasty.
Nice. All right. Well, it's been really good talking with you. If people want to connect with you, where's the best place to find you online?
You can reach me at my email address, or else you can reach me through the Neurodiversity Network.
And we'll include the email address in the show notes. I'll read it out as well in case people try and memorize it. It's tessarosemagic@gmail.com. Is that the right one?
That's correct. Thank you.
Wonderful. Do you have any final words or asks for our audience?
Yes. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's sometimes the biggest hurdle. Honor your body. It's a compass, and it will let you know what you need if you listen to it. And lean into your strengths. Know them, grow them, and celebrate them. I think a lot of times we get stuck on what we're not capable of doing or feel like there's all these limitations that we're facing as neurodivergent people, but we have so many amazing strengths too. And I think that for me, leaning into those has been really important for me, like creativity.
Wonderful words. It was great having you on. We'll wrap the show with that.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you today.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.